Hey, this is Alex Reid, founder of Own Your Quiet, the leadership coaching practice for midlife introvert entrepreneurs. Now, you might not know this, but on the 2nd of January, it is World Introvert Day. And this is a day and an opportunity where introverts from all over the world can come together to celebrate the joys of being an introvert and at the same time to educate the wider world in terms of who we are and how we are, and also to challenge any of the pre-existing myths that are still associated with introvert and introversion, and those, for example, including that introversion equals shyness, which isn't the case. So in the spirit of celebrating World Introvert Day, I'd like to share with you some personal thoughts on a matter that's quite close to my heart, and that is how introverts from across the generational divide can come together to collaborate with each other. This is close to my heart because as an entrepreneur, I see it as really important that irrespective of what age we happen to be, there's always opportunities to come together and to collaborate, to help each other grow our respective businesses, and in doing so, help to solve some of the bigger societal, environmental challenges that the world is facing at the moment. And indeed, through the lens of the introvert, there are quite a number of good reasons that I'll touch on why introverts from different generations should be collaborating together. And this recognizing that we share something in common, and that is the personality traits that come with being an introvert. So why is it important that collaboration happens in the first place, irrespective of whether we happen to be introverts or extroverts or indeed ambiverts? And the reasons are wide in number, but can really be distilled down to some really important global issues that we've all got a role in looking at and contributing to solving. And the big ones that I'm sure we'll all be familiar with are climate change, COVID and how we recover from COVID, an aging population, and really importantly, rising inequality between the haves and the have-nots. These are all huge issues, and collaboration is really the only way that we're going to make a big dent in starting to solve them. And taking climate change as one example, there are many good reasons why, irrespective of who you are, what sort of personality type you are, that coming together and working with others to solve specific challenges related to climate change is really important. And indeed, the same can be said for COVID, for the aging population, and for rising inequality. So what does successful collaboration look like? Well, I think there's three key elements to it. First of all, there's a willingness to share. Now, sharing is something that's easy to take for granted, but at the same time, depending on what it is you're being asked to share, it can sometimes be a challenge. However, the willingness to share is a key component of successful collaborations, and creating the right environment where sharing can take place is critically important. Second of all, listening, and specifically active listening, because ultimately for any collaboration to thrive, there needs to be a common understanding of each of the members of the collaboration. And listening is a skill, much like any other. So the more that the skill of listening can be brought into collaboration, the more successful it's likely to be. And then thirdly, there's the process of reflecting. And reflecting, again, is really, really important for collaborations on the basis that ultimately, as information is being shared, it also needs to be reflected on. And that means giving anyone who's part of a collaboration the opportunity and the time to reflect, and then through that reflection to come back into the collaboration to share their thoughts. So I highlight these three crucial components of collaboration because when we look at collaboration through that lens of introverts, there are some very important superpowers that we can bring into these collaborations. The way I like to describe it is it's a bit like super glue. As introverts, we can be the glue that brings the individuals within a collaboration together and helps that collaboration to grow and to thrive. And there are some specific aspects or specific qualities that we as introverts can bring in to these collaborations. Number one is the power of introspection. We are generally introspective by nature. We like to reflect and then communicate, not the other way around. And that's highly important in collaborations because ultimately, purely just communicating isn't going to ultimately produce the outcomes that any collaboration is looking to achieve. There needs to be that element of introspection, and that's something that introverts are particularly good at. Second of all, there is intuition. And again, introverts tend to have very strong intuitions about people and things. And while it's easy to poo-poo intuition because it's hard to quantify, the reality is that in all our lives, intuition plays a very important role. And again, in the guise of collaborations, being able to share your intuitions about the individuals, but also the subject matter that a collaboration is focusing on is very important. Thirdly, there's empathy. And again, as introverts, we tend to be highly empathetic. And we're hearing a lot at the moment about empathy, particularly through the journey we've been in 2020 with COVID and the need for greater empathy in the world and the great need for greater empathy within organisations. This is something that introverts really have an important role to play within any collaboration. For it to be successful, empathy has to be prioritised. And as individual introverts, the more empathetic we can be towards the other individuals in the collaboration, the stronger the bonds are going to be within it, i.e. the superglue sets and makes those bonds really strong. And then finally, there's creativity. And again, introverts tend to have a very strong creative streak. And in any collaboration, and particularly when it's focused on trying to solve specific challenges related to these global issues that we're facing at the moment, creativity is going to be highly valued indeed. It's something that humans, and much less so computers and robots, are able to excel at. And as introverts, the more creativity we can bring in to collaborations, then the more options that those collaborations are going to have in terms of avenues for moving the deliberations around the challenges they're focusing on. So in summary, we as introverts have some natural superpowers. These are superpowers that we should really be emphasizing in the context of successful collaborations. So that brings me on now to the key theme and focus of this short presentation, and that's the benefits of collaboration between introverts from across the generations. Now, this might seem as a very obvious thing. Why wouldn't this be happening already? Well, the reality is that it may be, but there is a huge amount of scope for much more of it to happen. And the fact that we have this common thread, this common bond that connects us all, irrespective to age, means that there are some very powerful reasons why introverts who've got some form of passion for making the world a better place should be coming together and working more closely together. So on one hand, we have the baby boomer generation. So that's the more elderly generation who are typically in the late 50s, 60s and slightly beyond. So at that age, there's a lot of lived experience. So as introverts, they'll have many stories to tell about the role their introversion has played in the life that they've lived, the good, the bad and the ugly. And that is really wisdom, and it's wisdom that should be shared with the younger generations who are making their own journey through life and coming to understand at a deeper level what it means to have an introverted personality. And indeed, in the context of collaborations, and particularly business collaborations, the knowledge and the expertise and the wisdom that the older baby boomer generation have can really be of great value to those who are younger and are open and willing to receive some guidance from those who have lived that little bit longer. Then in the middle, we have someone like myself, a Generation X person. And the importance of a Generation X person in the context of these collaborations is the fact that they can be the connector, the person who is close to both generations, the baby boomers, the millennials, and even to a certain degree, the Gen Ys as well. And as connectors, what they can help to do is build the bridges between those two more distant generations. So taking technology as one example, where that older baby boomer generation are perhaps slightly less acquainted and confident with the types of technology that are going to become commonplace as we move through the next few years, the Generation X individual and introvert can help to connect them to that younger generation who are really the driving force behind developing these technologies. And indeed, probably noteworthy that quite a number of the developers of these new technologies are likely to be introverts. So software developers being an obvious example. Yes, it's a generalization, but typically the introverts of the world are those who do like to live in their own world and spend their own time designing and developing things. And that's a good example when it comes to technology. So the Generation X introverts is really a bridge builder between the baby boomers and the millennials. And then finally, you have the millennials themselves. And these are the people who, being slightly younger, are coming to terms with the realities of what an introvert life actually means to them. And because they have the technical savvy, the technical know-how, because they have that extra degree of oomph to a certain degree, and energy to really change the world, it's very important that they're matched up with the older generations who've got that bit more wisdom and can in some ways provide a sort of guiding light for the millennials as they move forward through the next few years of their lives and of their careers. So again, in summary, there's some very compelling reasons why we as introverts should, if we're not already, be making more of an effort to cross any bridges that may exist between one generation and another, so that in coming together, we have some of the parts taking place whereby the results that are actually delivered by effective collaboration between the younger introverts and the older introverts create significant impact in addressing some of these major global challenges that we're facing in the world as well. And probably just worthwhile highlighting in wrapping up this particular part of the presentation to stress that because we're all introverts and because it's something that we live with and we embrace as we get older, the more that our experiences of living as an introvert can be shared with others irrespective of age, then the more wisdom we'll all have and the more we can all help to educate the others in the world who don't necessarily see them as introverts and perhaps again don't fully understand the day-to-day realities of what being an introvert and living as an introvert actually means. Okay, so to wrap up, this short presentation has really been inspired by World Introvert Day, which is taking place on the 2nd of January. It's important that as introverts, we share our knowledge, we share our wisdom, our lived experience with the wilder world, and of course come together and celebrate with each other as well. So perhaps today is the day that you start collaborating with introverts from different generations, because who knows where it might lead. So in closing, happy World Introvert Day. Make the most of it, and I hope you've enjoyed this presentation, and by all means, if you like it, please drop me an email. My email address is alex@ownyourquiet.com. That's alex@ownyourquiet.com.